Hello, welcome to Homemade Mathematics. My name is Sierra, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to add integers. We're going to be looking at multiple strategies today that will eventually help us get our little cheat sheet down here that we are going to fill out together and see why that works. Like I said, I'm going to start by showing you multiple strategies because we all learn a little bit differently. So the three strategies I'm going to show you is 1, using a model, 2, using a number line, and 3, using a real-world situation to think about that problem. Go ahead and give all three strategies a try and see which one works best for you. The first way I'm going to show you is by using a model. So one way I've done this in the past is to create little coins or whatever that are red and blue or red and black, and you can use those as positive and negatives. But instead, I'm going to just draw them up on the board today. We have the problem -8 plus 5. That means we have 8 reds, 8 negatives, and we have 5 positives. In my last video where I was introducing integers, we talked about how all positives have an opposite, and that's just the negative version of it. Whenever we have opposites, they're going to cancel each other out. Right? So if we have a positive and we have a negative, those are going to cancel each other out to get us 0. So we know for every pair of negative and positive, they're just going to cancel each other out. Oh, we cancel a negative, we cancel a positive. Cancel a negative, cancel a positive. Cancel a negative, cancel a positive. Keep doing this until you don't have any left of either the negatives or the positives. So as you can see here, I don't have any positives left, and I'm left with 3 negatives, right, which would get me -3. What if we had 2 negatives, though? So what if instead it was -3 plus -2? And sometimes when you have plus a negative like that, you're going to see them put parentheses around it. That still just means plus a -2. Didn't change the meaning of it at all. It's just to show you that that is a negative with that too. So here with my model, I'm going to have 3 negatives, and we're going to have another 2 negatives. So now I don't have any positives to cancel out my negatives, so I can't cancel anything. So what does that mean? That means I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they're red, so 5 negatives. -5. All right, I know we know the answers to these now, but I want to show how we could have done these if we used a number line, because that might make more sense to you. So you can see I drew my number line up here. I had to kind of alternate with the negatives because I kind of squished them together there. But we can also use a number line to solve these two problems. So for example, our first problem here, -8 plus 5. I know we know the answer, but I want to show how you could use a different strategy to get that same answer we did using the model. We're always going to start where our first number is. All right, we're going to start on our number line at -8. All right, so -8 is way down here. The second number and the second sign of the number is going to tell you which direction to go and how many spots you should go. So for example, we have +5. We're going to go to the right, because our positive numbers are to the right. So we're going to go to the right 5. If this would have been plus a -5, our negative numbers are to the left, so we would have went to the left 5. All right, but we have +5, so we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look at that. It gets us our -3 that we got before. Let's take a look at our second one. So this time, we're starting at -3 where we just left off. All right, so we're at -3. But this time, we have that -2. Now remember, our negative numbers are to the left, so that means we need to go to the left 2. So if we go 1, 2, gets us our -5 that we got before with our models. And then the last way that you can approach these integer problems is by thinking of them as a word problem. So in my last video, I shared some examples of where we see integers in the real world. So the three I talked about were temperature, elevation, and money. All right, so I'm going to use two of those to think about these problems. So if we use money to think about this problem, -8, that would be like money that you owe, right? You don't have $8, you owe $8 to someone. So let's say you owe $8 to your friend, but then we have +5, so that means you're paying them. So you owed your friend $8, but then you paid them $5. Do you still owe them, or are you in the positive? You did not pay them all the way back, so you are still in the negative, which the difference between 8 and 5 would be 3. So you still owe your friend $3, which would again get us our -3. If we look at this problem here, our -3 plus a -2, let's say we use weather as an example for this one. It's at -3 degrees. Then a few hours later, it goes down another 2, right? -2. We know that negative is going down. So if we're at -3 and we go down another -2, a lot of people want to tell me, oh, it's -1 now. If it's going down 2 degrees, is it going to get colder or warmer? Right, it's going to get colder. So -3 down 2 degrees, we're going to get at our -5. You can use those three strategies to help you solve any integer problem. However, when you get to some of the bigger numbers, so let's say I give you this problem, and that one's not even that bad. But if I gave you that problem and I told you, all right, put it on a number line, or draw a model, right? Make 32 red circles and 65 blue ones and see how many cancel out and see what you're left with. That's going to take a lot of time. So we can use those three strategies I just talked about to fill out this nice little cheat sheet that you can use for any addition problem with integers. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do that. If you're taking notes, I would go ahead and put this little chart in your notes because this is going to be extremely helpful. As you can see on the left here, we have 3 different situations with adding integers, right? We have adding a positive and a positive together. We have adding a negative and a negative together. And then we have adding a positive and negative together, so where they're different signs. Each situation, you're going to do a slightly different thing. So we're going to go ahead and start with our positive and positive because we should already know that. So if we have 2 positive numbers, right, let's say, I'll even give an example. Let's say 5 plus 8, right? A positive plus a positive. We're going to go ahead and add those numbers together. 5 plus 8 gets me 13. And since they're both positive numbers, we're going to be even more positive, right? We're at a +5 and we're going another +8. So we're even more positive. Once we get the negatives in there, it does get a little trickier. So let's go ahead. I'm going to put a couple of examples up here, and I want you to use one of the previous strategies I showed to see if we can come up with what operation and what sign it's going to be, or if it's always the same operation, is it always the same sign, or does it change? All right, so I have 2 questions up here. If you want to go ahead and try them yourself using which strategy you prefer, go ahead and pause the video and do that. Otherwise, follow along with me to see how I would solve these. So the first one, I'm going to use our model strategy. Again, you can use whatever strategy you prefer, but I'm just going to use the model strategy for this one. So we have -5 plus a -8. All right, so they're both negative, so that means I'm going to have 5 red circles and another 8 red circles. So remember, before, when we didn't have a negative and a positive, we didn't have anything to cancel out. So all we really can do is count up these negatives, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So just like a +5 and a +8 got you +13 in that last problem, a -5 and a -8 is going to get you a -13. Okay, so be thinking about what operation are we doing? How do I know what the sign is? All Right, and then my second example here, I'll go ahead and use a number line to show. All right, so remember with our number lines, we're going to start with our first number. So our first number is -2, so on my number line, I'm going to go to -2. And then I'm adding a -1. But remember, our negative numbers go to the left, so we're going to want to go to the left one, which gets us -3. Again, we have a negative and a negative, and it's getting us a bigger negative, right? Negative and a negative, bigger negative. So what you probably have noticed from now is we're just taking those negatives, that 5 and that 8, and we are actually adding them, right? We're adding them to get a bigger negative number. Is there ever going to be a time when you put a negative number and a negative number together and it's going to get you a positive? No, right? If we're already negative and then we're going further negative, we're just going to get a bigger negative number, right? So when you have two negative numbers, just add them up, put that negative sign on there. The last situation is slightly different, right? This is when we have one positive and one negative. So let's take a look at some examples like that. Okay, so this time we have our positive number and our negative number. I kind of switched up, so our negative came first here, and then it came second in the second one. Does not matter which one comes first or second. All right, so if I have -10 plus 8, I already used a model and a timeline, so I'm going to use a real world problem to think about this one. All right, so let's say I owed a friend $10, and I was able to earn $8 and pay them back $8. All right, I did not pay them back the full $10. I only paid them back $8. So that means I still owe them $2, right? And if we owe money, that's going to be a -2. All right, and then the second one, I'm going to use a number line again just because that's my favorite strategy. All right, so remember with our number lines, we're always going to start with our first number. So we're starting at a +4 right here. But then I have plus a negative. And remember, you might see it like this. You might have those parentheses around there. Don't freak out. It means the same exact thing. Nothing changed. So we know our negatives are going to the left. So since we have plus a -2, we have to go to the left. 1, 2, which lands us on a +2. All right, so I want you to look at my numbers that I have here and then look at my answers. I want you to see if you can think of what operation we're doing. Are we still adding? And then how do we know what the sign of our answer is going to be? Is it always positive? Is it always negative? Or does it depend on something? So if you take a closer look at these numbers and ignore the signs. So let's just look at 10 and 8. Forget which one's positive, which one's negative. We don't care right now. We just want to look at the numbers. If I have 10 and 8, am I adding? If I add, is that going to get me 2? No. If I add 4 and 2, is that going to get me 2? Also, no. So I'm not really adding when I have a positive and a negative. What could I do with 10 and 8 to get 2? What could I do with 4 and 2 to get 2? Right? We're no longer adding. We are now subtracting. Right? When we have one positive and one negative, like you saw in our models, they're going to cancel out until there's either only positive left or only negative left. So as you can see, my answer could be positive, my answer could be negative. So how in the world are we supposed to know if our answer is positive or negative? Well, let's take a look at our numbers. Here we had a -10 and a +8, and our answer was negative. Here we have a +4 and a -2, and our answer was positive. So how do we know if our answer is going to be positive or negative? Well, if you think about our models, they're going to cancel out until you have left of one, either positive or negative. If you look here, if we ignore the signs, is 10 or 8 bigger? Right? We have more negatives here, so that means we're going to be left with negatives. Right? Think about our models. If I had 10 red and 8 blue, I'm going to only have red left once they cancel out. Same thing down here, except for this time we have more positives, right? We have 4 positives and only 2 negatives. So when they cancel out, we're going to have positives left, right? So a nice little rule we can come up with this is you're going to take your larger number and your smaller number and you're going to subtract them. Then you have to decide, is it positive or negative? And you decide depending on which one's larger, right? If there's more negatives, your answer is negative. If there's more positives, your answer is positive. So your sign, you're going to take sign of the larger number. Absolute value, because like I said in my last video, you know, your negative is always going to be bigger, or your negative is always going to be smaller than your positive. So you want the sign of the larger number, absolute value of that larger number, right? If you're ignoring the signs, which one's bigger? That's going to be your sign. Now we have a nice little cheat sheet here, right? We take 2 positives, we're going to add them to make a bigger positive. If we have 2 negatives, adding 2 negatives, we're going to add them to make a bigger negative. If we have 1 positive and 1 negative, we're going to subtract, right? Cancel out, subtract, see what we're left with, and then if we have more positives, we'd be left with that many positives. If we have more negatives, we'd be left with that many more negatives. So just like I had a game for comparing integers, I actually have 2 different games you can play to practice adding integers. I know with adding integers in my classroom, we spent a lot of time doing worksheets, flashcards, which can get really boring. So I decided to come up with some games to make practicing this a little bit more fun, because it definitely does take some practice. So the game I would suggest starting out with first is my version of War 2.0. So I'm going to go ahead somewhere up here. I'm going to put a little link for War 2.0. What you do in that game is you flip over 2 cards, and then whoever has the larger answer. So if you were playing addition, you'd flip over 2 cards. Whoever has the largest sum would win those cards. And you're going to continue that until you run out of cards and then count up who has the most. But for more details on that game, again, check out the link I have up here. And then there's actually a harder version. So if you master the War 2.0 and you have that down, you can go ahead and play my game of Go Fish, which makes it a little more difficult because you have your hand of cards that you have to pick out true addition statements from. So that one's a little bit more of a challenge. So if you think you're ready for that, again, I'll put my Go Fish link up there as well. I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions at all, please go ahead and comment those down below. If you have any requests, I would love to hear those requests, right? Right now I'm just kind of doing what I think is needed, but if I had any requests, I would love to do a lesson over that. So comment those down below as well. Also, I am going to be trying to put out more than just 1 video a week, so if you are wanting to be updated on when those videos get posted, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and click the bell so you are notified whenever I post a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.